I'm gonna stop
Okay, Bart, are Palomos here yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Robert, you're here, but Barton is not, correct?
Yes, he is here. He's just having dinner, sitting next to me.
Oh, okay, so good. Yeah, and thank you for your wonderful generosity. You really help us to take this teaching, help us to move the teaching. You guys are really wonderful. So.
You bet.
Okay, so
Tom?
yeah, Bob. Yeah.
Maureen is not here. She's up in Oceanside. I'm still
Okay.
down in Mexico.
Okay, you're in
And
Mexico.
she just texted me and said she was having trouble getting on Zoom. So
Okay.
I'm
Well,
texting back and forth. We're trying to help her.
Yeah, is Hapa here? Tom Hapa?
I am, Tom.
Okay, great. David. Okay, Karen's here. Is Amy here? Amy's not here right now.
Not yet.
Okay, and John Tooth is not here yet, right? And Dana's here. And Jay Westfall, is she here, Jay? Okay, Jay's not here. Okay, so we do have a number of people. Okay, did somebody want to do, does somebody want to do an opening treatment? Anybody volunteer? Yeah, Dana, go ahead.
Okay. This beautiful moment of now, I recognize that divine flow, that infinite intelligence. And I absolutely invoke my awareness of this ever-present, perfect love, perfect God, perfect flow, perfect spirit. Doesn't matter the name. And I know that I am that place where that energy of flow shows up and moves out into the world. What's mine to do is to reflect and call forth that wisdom that already exists within me. What I know for myself, I know for each beloved person here tonight. So I speak my word of recognition that as the group gathers tonight, that awareness of that flow, of that intelligence, of that wisdom is enhanced. It grows, it blooms like a flower opening to reveal more and more and more, infinitely expressing in more ways as is needed and asked for in this planet at this time with this perfect group of divine individuals expressing that flow. So grateful to know these truths, so grateful for this time together, so grateful to be able to leave behind the busyness of the day and step into this perfect moment. And I release that knowing into the law where it can only say yes and only grow. And so it is.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, and so it is. Thank you. Okay, so some of you were not in prior courses with me, so I want to give you a background so you understand where we're going. First of all, New Thought Ministries teaches classes. We also train practitioners and ministers for licensing with Anton if people want to do that. We started a process called Professional Prayer Therapy Ministry. We haven't even got that's kind of the name, Professional Prayer Therapy Ministry. And we set some goals and ideas that one of the things we want to contribute to the movement is to try to help professionalize the practitioners by emphasizing record keeping and those kinds of things. And we talked about how we talked in the past in other classes about how we do that. We talked about what the idea of professional prayer therapy ministry is, and the plan that we were that as we train people to participate in it, it would be an online prayer ministry, and we talked about how we would keep the records and all of that kind of thing. So those people who are coming into this, so we needed a class. We needed a class that would kind of synthesize the basic things that we teach. And one of the things is Palamo wants to get his minister's license with the Emerson Institute, and so he's taken a lot of classes with us, and there will be we will have an examination for it so he can be prepared to take it. So one of the purposes of this class is to talk about the basics. So what we did in creating this particular class, we came up with this idea of a handbook, and we called it the 7 Spiritual Secrets of Science of Mind. It was to try to emphasize those areas that Ernest Holmes talked about that are really important, but are sometimes not talked about in the main curriculum. And so we came up with those 7 ideas. Now, that the one of them was, I forget whether it was the third, I guess it was the third one, was the question of identity. And last week we talked all about identity, and who is the I that is doing the treatment. And so this week we're moving to the 4th spiritual secret, which is reciprocity. But we're talking about it in relation to healing. And the idea first is to come up with a theory that we can totally embrace that is consistent with science. So I want to start, and I just sent everybody, I've been working on the slides for a long time, so I apologize for not getting them out earlier, but the slides are there and you can study them. I personally think that this is one of the most important lessons. If you, in going over the slides or going over the lessons, find an area that is inconsistent or doesn't make sense, bring it up, because what we're offering here is a healing theory that is consistent with Holmes, consistent with Thomas Troward, and consistent with science, what science tells us, as well as probably to some extent consistent with the idea of spiritual energy and quantum physics. So we offer this theory. This whole lesson is about that idea. So I want to start it with the discussion, and I'll make it really simple. And anybody can start in the beginning. When I took Science of Mind, I was taught basically that the reason there is a negative manifestation called disease is because there's negative thought that is somehow in the subconscious mind, and that because if I'm demonstrating that disease, it's because of my own, quote, stinking thinking, and that I need to change the way I think and think positive thoughts, get rid of the negative thoughts, and if I think positively, the negative thoughts go away, and that the manifestation of disease is because of thoughts. Okay, that's what I was taught. Okay, so the first thing when I studied, I found out, number one, that when the paleontologists dug up, somebody's got their microphone on. I think it's who's got the phone there?
I do. Can you mute me?
Yeah, I can mute you. Yes. Right. Okay. Thanks, Maureen. Thanks for coming in. So the paleontologists have proven that dinosaurs who lived on this earth 60 million years ago, before there was any human beings, had arthritis in their bones. Okay, so The question is, and we'll take this as a jumping off point, if disease is the result of negative thinking, and dinosaurs have a disease called a label of a disease called arthritis. It's in anybody's book it would be called a disease. How did that disease get there if there was no human being to stinking think? Anybody? So that was the first dilemma I saw. What's the answer? Anybody come up with one? What?
Fred Flintstone?
That would work if Fred was really alive. The problem is we've made a statement that we're consistent with science. So that if we say things like well, that somehow the race consciousness was there or something at that time, or we come up with some kind of theory, we're really stretching the idea, and we're really having to accept those things on faith. And it's really faith that's in derogation. We'll call it in derogation of reason. It contradicts reason. We can't have a spiritual healing theory that contradicts reason, or else we're just like any other religion. I mean, I got a friend of mine who was a fundamental Christian, and I tried to point. He told me the Earth was 6,000 years old. I said that's impossible. They've discovered fossils and dated them, and they've had carbon dating and everything like that shows the Earth is much older than that. You know what he said? He said, "Oh, well, that's just God trying to fool us to see how much faith we have." Now, see, I mean, I might as well not be a religious scientist if I come up with a theory like that. So I got to come up with a theory that explains why dinosaurs got arthritis. So who's got?
Dr. Tom,
Yes.
I've always, my way of thinking, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but being in a human existence is not a human existence. It's a physical existence on this plane of existence on Earth. So being on Earth, whether there were humans there or not, dinosaurs were subject to different kinds of diseases that were there, and because of their weight and the pressure on their bones or whatever they had to eat or didn't have to eat could cause to arthritis. It doesn't have to be that the dinosaurs were thinking naughty or bad thoughts or whatever.
Okay.
So I mean, we do have that element of being in this physical world, and with diseases and with viruses and those types of things also. So
okay, so that's really interesting, but in order to really flush that out, I mean, I think you might be onto something, but in order to really flush it out, you've got to connect it up, and I don't think you've done that yet. What you told me that we live in physical bodies, and our physical bodies, because of all the things in the physical world, are going to be subject to all of these things going on, because that's kind of like, you didn't say this exactly, but that's kind of like the animalistic part of us, and that we'd be subject to those kinds of things. Okay, I understand that. But how is it then, Karen, that we believe that at essence, you hear that statement, at essence, we are perfect, whole and complete, and that if we know that we are perfect, whole and complete, we are not going to be subject to these diseases.
well, being perfect, whole, and complete is the essence of who we are. It doesn't mean that we're not going to catch something or get hurt or the like. But what you have said, and I believe it's in this lesson, but I've heard you say it before, or Troward said it, whatever, but you have said it, that higher elements or the higher consciousness controls the lower consciousness. So if we do get a disease or we do get injured, we have that ability to heal ourselves through our consciousness. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, but I mean, what it comes down to is, okay, so I started out with saying that what I was taught when we started out, that negative thoughts cause negative manifestation. And when
I
I
don't
found
believe
out the
that.
dinosaurs, when
I
I
don't
found out
believe
about the dinosaurs, I didn't believe that. Yeah, so you have to come up with some other kind of theory, some other kind of solution that makes sense. And what is that for you? You're kind of touching around the edges of it, but you haven't really hit me with it yet.
I haven't taken the deep dive.
Well, I'm you know, maybe you have, but
Well, let me give you one example of what happened to me, and it was a mystical experience. A couple of years ago, I haven't had it this year, thank God, but I was susceptible to this extreme form of seasonal asthma, and when I would get it, I couldn't even. I mean, just breathing would make me cough so badly that I would fall on the floor. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't. Swallowing would make me have contractions of my esophagus and my bronchial tubes. It was really severe. So this one time I was sitting in my chair here, and I was really depressed because I was taking classes at the time, and 2 classes I had to get an extension in because I just couldn't do it. And I just went into a meditation, and the meditation I went into, I don't even remember, but I went into my body, and my consciousness, I just went into my body, and I connected with the inside of my body, with my cells and the blood and everything that makes up what's inside of us. And I just started to cry, and I said, thank you, because I know you're trying to heal me. Thank you for doing your ancient rituals within me, trying to help me. I haven't said thank you, but I thank you. And so I just really, 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 really got lost became one with the cells in my body. And I was in such gratitude to them for what they were doing to help me. And the next day, I didn't have any cough at all. It totally went away.
Okay, but you still haven't. I mean that's fine, and that's good. But what we want to do is we want to have a healing theory that we can talk to our clients about that is rational, and understandable. See, here's the quote by Ernest Holmes. He says, "Each human being is fundamentally perfect. Our whole premise is perfect God, perfect humanity, perfect being. On this alone do we base all our argument." Now, okay, so did anybody else? I mean, you got a good start for us, Karen. But and I understand what you told me. It's a story about how it worked for you, but if I was your client, I'd still say, what is the mechanism by which the healing occurs? That's what I'm after. What is the mechanism by which the healing occurs that we can use, that works, that makes sense, and that we can apply it to science? Dana, you had your hand up. You have to.
I fear mine might be around the edges as well, but what I'm thinking about my own illusion of arthritis in my hands. And I'm thinking about there is an alignment, and we can be physically out of alignment by breaking our leg because we've put our foot out of alignment, but we can be spiritually and emotionally out of alignment. Even the dinosaurs could be physically out of alignment. The arthritis appearance in my hands, I'm quite sure, is ignoring the call to step into my practitioner practice, to step into that education, to step into writing. I was being called for years to step away from my being a flight attendant and airline work and step into this next expression, and I kept putting it off, or I'm not ready, or I'm not worthy.
Okay, so I don't want to cut you off, and you.
Well, no, it's that alignment thing. It's what I'm.
Go, but it sounds like you told me that the reason the arthritis appears is because of your resistance to move.
I'm out of alignment of that flow, and I think
but what is the we've already shown. I mean, we've already talked about and shown that whatever. I don't know what the physical mechanisms of arthritis, but we know that everything is spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you used the word illusion. I don't know what you really meant by that, but
I don't want it to be real in my experience.
Yeah, in your experience, but it has a reality, and it has because everything emanates out of God. It must emanate out of God. It can't be. See, that's how Christian Science tried to solve the problem. Yeah. Christian Science said the material world isn't real, and therefore that solves the problem, because the disease is all illusion, and it's illusion. Yeah. But I never could figure out the thing. If the material world isn't real, then the stars aren't real, and the heavens aren't real, and the trees aren't real, and my physical body isn't real. Well, I never could get it. Now, maybe there's a Christian Scientist who could explain it to me, but I couldn't get it.
I grew up around Christian Scientists, and I never got it. So,
yeah, I mean, I always said I was a Christian Scientist until I got up at midnight one night to go to the bathroom and stubbed my toe. And I said, I'm not that anymore. Who's got the theory? I mean, this lesson that we've got really tries to present a theory that is consistent, that works, that we can test, that makes total sense. So who's got the theory?
Hey, it's Barden.
Okay, Barden.
I don't have the theory, but I mean, what it prompts me to do is go back to the whole thing of Jesus, and like the story with the Roman the soldier, whatever, that has the centurion and the servant, and because of his faith. Yeah. And if you think about how supposedly Jesus, he like unified with God. He said, "The Father in me seeth and heareth me always, and he doeth the blah blah blah." And because of the centurion's faith, he was healed. So it's kind of really doesn't matter about the condition. It's more about the success of stepping to a higher level of consciousness or more unification with God, that it somehow it over.
Okay, so
it negates the negative condition and changes the physical.
What I hear you saying that at a level we're perfect, whole, and complete, and for some reason we're functioning there's an appearance at another level of the disease, that is, and that all we need to do is have enough faith, and we'll move ourselves up to that level.
Right.
Complete wholeness, and the disease will just go away.
It's almost like the difference between quantum mechanics.
Yeah.
The laws on that level and the laws on, Einsteinian.
I could buy that, but my mind would still want to say, well, what's the mechanism? I understand if you have enough faith, you can go to the higher dimension of spirit that lifts up and lets go of anything that is less than that. But I still don't get really, what's the mechanism by which, what's the theory of the healing? Other than, I understand, and that's a good way to go. I mean, you could go tell your client, what. And here's something good, by the way, if you do this, because I learned this, and it's great. It's called borrowing faith. It works really well if you've got, because you could ask the client, do you have the faith? Do you have the faith that and you could use the example of the centurion story. Do you have the faith that you're perfect, whole, and complete? And the client may said, I don't know. And then you say to the client, do you believe that I, as the practitioner, have the faith? And the client may probably say, yeah, I believe you have the faith. Then you say, then borrow my faith and know the truth. And that works a lot. It saved the life of Mary Mannon Morrissey. That very process saved her life when she went through a process when she was 16 years old. She got pregnant. This is her story, so we can tell it. When she was 16 years old, she got pregnant, and she felt such shame because she came from a family that said, how could you do this to us? How could you do this to our family? You're a straight A student. You're one of the people in the high school and everyone looks up to, and here you failed everyone. In those days, remember, I don't know if you remember that, but anybody who got pregnant in the high school in those days, they couldn't continue on in the school. They had to go to continuation school or they had to go somewhere else. So Mary was outcast. And what happened to her then, she got sick because she felt such disgrace. And so she goes to the hospital and one of her kidneys completely failed. And the doctors said that her other kidney was operating at 20% capacity and then they didn't know it might fail too. And she might die. So it just so happened that a practitioner came in, and by the way, she was a Christian Science practitioner. She came in and she said, and that's how Mary got into it. And that was what she said. Do you believe I have the faith? And Mary said, I think you do, and she did. And she got better. And that not only saved her life, but it also led her to find out about spirituality, and of course she became a wonderful minister.
Tom,
okay. Yes, go ahead.
Maureen wants you to unmute her.
Okay, all right, we'll unmute Maureen. Okay, go ahead, Maureen.
Oh, hi. Well, I didn't mean to interrupt. I had a comment before, but I didn't know how to say anything. But yeah, I love that story that Mary tells, that when we cannot believe, the appearance is so much in our mind, then we can have someone else believe for us. And she was able to heal that other kidney and survive, which is pretty amazing. But I wanted to go back to your other comment. I believe, we believe we live in a closed system, which is governed by the state of entropy. And when we start slowing down, our vibration slows down, then we are susceptible, I believe, to other organisms of a slower vibration, which we get sick. I mean, they're here. We all live together. And the thing is, I believe, this is my own belief, that scientific prayer, affirmative prayer, allows us to go out beyond time and space. We basically raise our energy level. And if you were into quantum physics, you would understand that, like the electron goes outside of time and space. We are able to bring that energy as if it's not a closed system, and we use that energy to heal.
Okay, great. And to me, that makes total sense. Now, when we do that as teachers of science of mind, the first thing we've got to know is that for some reason, Ernest Holmes never talked about entropy. I looked for it everywhere. He never talked about it. And it just makes total sense that anything that exists in time and space is going to be subject to entropy. So tell us what entropy is, first of all, Maureen.
Well, it's a law of thermodynamics, which one of the laws of thermodynamics that basically says that something of a certain vibration or level is going to slow down and lose heat, lose Losing heat is losing energy, losing electrons. But that's for a closed system. Now, if we believe that we are not in a closed system and that we have the power to go to the field, the quantum field, the field of God, consciousness, that we can basically use energy from the total field, the quantum field, to raise our consciousness. But entropy is that slowing down. It's natural. Things cool off. You heat them up, they cool down.
Okay, so if we applied that to the dinosaurs, then what I heard you say is because they're living in time and space, they're living at a level of awareness or consciousness that they don't know that there's a dimension that they could, in other words, they can't practice spiritual mind treatment. The dinosaurs don't sit around and say, okay, we'll do a little spiritual mind treatment. They can't do that because of their level of awareness. Neither can the animals, and neither can many humans, because many humans take the position also that they're subject to the scientific laws of thermodynamics and the slowing down. So that makes sense. So that dinosaurs, something begins to break down in their system, and therefore they're susceptible to lower vibrations of energy, which could be incompatible with them and therefore cause disease. That makes sense to me.
Right, leads to their death.
Yeah,
right.
That makes sense to me. Now let's bring that up because it's on the slides. Since we're there, let's talk about that for a minute, because Ernest Holmes didn't talk about that. He didn't really make a distinction between death and disease. The reason I put it in the lesson, and I really urge you to study the lesson, because there's a lot of material there, and it's fundamental to the idea of healing. And as I said at the very beginning, if there's something in the logic that doesn't make sense or you think is incorrect, let us know, because I personally think I said it a little differently than Maureen did. I like the way she said a lot of it, but it's basically we're saying the same thing, that there are levels of energy, and that we can tap into higher levels of energy through the use of spiritual mind treatment. That Troward said the higher can control the lower if the higher chooses to do so. But what Ernest Holmes, because Ernest didn't distinguish between the idea of death and the idea of disease, we get a lot of people who, well, first of all, they'll say, theoretically, using science of mind principles, can you live forever in this human body that you have? And what is the answer to that question, by the way? Can you live forever in this human body that you have?
No.
Okay, Love says no. What about Maureen's theory that if there's something that goes wrong with the human body you have, you're subject to entropy, but because you can tap into dimensions and fields beyond time and space, you could tap into energy that could cure any of the issues, and so you could actually cure.
Well, as a friend of mine always says in Science of Mind, you're allowed to die. You're just not allowed to be sick.
Yeah, that's.
In other words,
it's because.
In other words, we can't defeat entropy to the extent of preventing death.
Well,
we can significantly.
Well, there are some people that have. I mean, there are people like Jesus. There are people like Avatar Babaji.
Yeah.
Most of these are Hindu teachers, and they have defeated death, or they have changed their bodies to be of a higher vibration.
Now, see,
when I say we,
yeah,
I mean us, us normal
the average
folks.
person. Okay,
the
but
average person, even the average science of mind person.
Okay, okay, Bob. But do you agree that it is theoretically possible to attain physical immortality?
It's theoretically possible if we can, or to the extent that we can reach the very highest level of consciousness, which
Okay.
unfortunately, I think that's not achievable for most of us. It has been obviously for a select few individuals, but
and maybe just look at this when you study. Marie mentioned Jesus. In the postword to the voice celestial, Ernest deals with this question directly, and he says in there that what he says, this is just Ernest now. Ernest says that when Jesus came back, he appeared as a soul body and not a physical body. Now that contradicts some of the other people who said, Thomas put his hand in and felt the blood and that was put in the Bible because some people wanted it to be a physical resurrection of Jesus as a unique individual. But okay, so maybe he did, maybe he didn't, and then Babaji, of course, is their story is that he meditates and stays and does everybody know what the silver cord is?
Yeah.
The silver cord. There's a picture of it, and the silver cord is this little cord, the cord that connects the soul body to the physical body, and at time of death, the cord breaks, and the soul body goes off, leaving the physical body, which decays, which is totally now subject to entropy and totally decays. But the soul body then has the ability to produce a new body. Paloma, did you have a question or comment there? Saw a hand go up there.
No. I'm just scratching my head.
Oh. Oh, okay. So Babaji, in that story, Babaji lived in a cave and meditated and kept just this very tenuous connection with his physical body, and then like every 60 years he popped back into the physical body, walked around, stretched his muscles, and then went back to his cave. not a great physical life. But Ernest never talked about that idea so much. But the question, it is a question that you should think about as a practitioner, especially if you're treating with somebody who is older and you want to talk to him. The person may want you to treat for his physical body to get better. And you've heard that story, that the patient died, but a healing took place. Can somebody explain what that means? The patient died, but a healing took place? Anybody want to shoot at that one?
The healing takes place at a spiritual level first.
Okay.
And then a physical level. So a healing can take place at a physical level, at a spiritual level, and the physical body can still choose to, or involuntarily.
The person will be in total harmony and total oneness, and say to you, now I'm ready to release my physical body. Because he's come to the knowledge that Ernest says in the Declaration of Principles, we believe in the immortality, the eternality, and the continuity of the individual soul forever and ever expanding. And he says that when the soul leaves this physical body in this time and space, it moves to another dimension in which it wishes to express, and it will then create a body that will allow it to express in that time and space. So the soul has the ability, according to Holmes, to produce a new physical body in order to continue to express. Okay, we haven't totally got to this thing that's Is there anybody here who wants to defend the argument that the reason the dinosaurs got arthritis was because of stinking thinking? What about dogs and cats? Now I had somebody tell me that one time, and I didn't believe it then, but because I said to him, I said, well, okay, now I know veterinarians, and a veterinarian will tell you the dog can get cancer. Well, how does the dog get cancer? And what did anybody get the answer to that one? How does the dog get cancer?
I've heard some channel some stuff is that the dogs are actually picking up the energy or the discordant something or another from their human owners.
Yeah, that's what they got. This guy tried to tell me.
Yeah, manifesting it, right.
Yeah. But then you can go out into the wilds or where there isn't any humans, they're just the wild wolves, and they get cancer. And other animals get it, where they haven't had any connection with humans. That's why I use dinosaurs, because that practitioner comes back and says, oh yeah, but there's race consciousness. The race consciousness, even though the animal doesn't have a master, he's subject to race consciousness. So it's the stinking thinking of the consciousness of the race that causes it. That never flew with me. So does anybody got the mechanism? I mean, Maureen was very close to what, and maybe she said it, what it is. What is it? Anybody else want to jump in here?
Again, this has been really interesting. I'm kind of scratching my head about this too, but the one thing that I get is the whole idea of vibration and energy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
The vibration and energy is slower, and that again, I mean, I've done prayer work for people who have moved on, and I've known their perfection. So knowing their perfection, they go ahead and they move on. So I think again, it's the whole idea of vibration.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and Karen said it kind of back at the beginning. She kind of touched on it, and I've kind of come to believe that too as part of evolution. If you look at the whole history of evolution, and Troward talks about it, he said the entire universe is alive, from the rocks to the plants to the animals to the humans. It's all livingness, and as Maureen said, because this livingness is in time and space, we're all subject to some kind of decay. The physical body is subject to these kinds of diseases, but if you continue the evolutionary process, the first thing that Troward says is, okay, you're subject to all of this stuff, but you begin to realize, you begin to grow in your awareness, and you begin to realize that you can use your own power of choice. And that's where he introduces what's called the personal factor, that you begin to consciously choose rather than simply allow the process to take place mechanically and generically, or by what he called the law of averages. Everything evolves by the law of averages, but then you reach a place where the individual has the ability to touch dimensions that previously could not. And one of the dimensions, as Maureen said, is beyond time and space. And by touching that dimension beyond time and space, you can actually connect up with the energy that prevents the entropy or gives additional energy to stop the entropy process from taking place, and so the disease or the death does not occur. So that just kind of ties it up. It's what you just said, Michael. It's energy, but it's also energy that you, as in the evolvement of who we are, you realize, say, okay, I am not just a physical being. I have the consciousness to open myself to another dimension, a dimension beyond time and space. And when I do that, I contact a type of energy that flows through me. Now, Teilhard talked about that energy, and I know most of us haven't read The Phenomena of Man by Teilhard, but Teilhard was a scientist, you know. He was a paleontologist, and he specifically dealt with the issue of entropy. And what did he say? Does anybody know what he said when you move beyond? When you actually move to that next dimension, you open yourself to an energy beyond time and space. And what did he call that energy? Anybody? Well, he called it two things. He called it radial energy rather than tangential energy. He compared it, the two. But the most important thing he called it is love. Now, this is for the first time we're thinking about love in a little bit different way. We're thinking about love as an energy that is beyond time and space, that is the glue of the universe, that holds everything together. And then the statement that sounds like a romantic in a way, a wild romantic, just looks at you and say, if you love enough, you can heal anything. Now, when I first heard that, all you have to do is love enough. I thought, you know, I didn't know. I thought that, you know, I thought of romantic love and somehow falling in love and all of those kinds of things. But what it really means is that if you open yourself to this dimension beyond time and space, there's this energy that holds the entire universe together. It's called love energy, and if you get in touch with that energy, you can heal anything.
Dr. Tom, can I tell a little story that kind of an example of that love energy?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Through prayer. Sunday, the last day of our retreat, in the morning, I was in the dining room and I was saying something to Dr. Christina, and I took a step back and I just fell backwards, hit my head and just went down. Well, when that happened, everybody in the room stood up and formed a circle and went into prayer. And after a while, after I had gotten up and everything, at least 3 people came to me. One man was in tears and thanked me, not for falling, but for having this. They said, the first girl that told me, she said when they were in prayer, she felt an energy go swoosh right by her and go right into the middle of the circle, and she saw it. And then another girl, another woman came and told me almost the exact same thing that she witnessed. And then this man told me he was new to the school, and he said he's always wondered about spirit and if it's real and if you can see it. And he had tears in his eyes. He said, oh my gosh, I'll never forget the experience that I had because of our prayer circle and all of us being in prayer. And he said, I absolutely felt and saw the spirit enter our circle. So, I mean, it's like, well, I said, well, thank you. I'm glad to be of service. But I thought that was like, I mean, they were so touched. Each one of them separately were so, had such an illumination of experience from that, being in that prayer circle and that happening. So
yeah, so it sounds like, however it was done, it invoked it invoked this love energy that everyone felt. So the question then becomes, does this make sense as the mechanism of healing? That the real mechanism of healing is a spiritual vibratory energy that holds the entire universe together and comes to be known as love. Does that make sense? Is that something that people can grab onto and use as a practitioner. And then the statement, if you only open and love enough, anything can be healed. Does that
and that means loving ourselves too, Dr. Tom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of people who are sick, and I've had clients who don't want to get better. I mean, they say they do, but that is their story.
Yeah.
That illness has been their story, and they really don't. They say they don't want to be sick, but at the same time they don't want to let it go because they're afraid to lose their story.
Well, right, and when Louise Hay became famous, remember she went into LA at the height of the AIDS epidemic. She gathered all these people into groups, and she convinced them that one of the things that was going on is they were blocking themselves from self-love. It was the same thing that Mary went through. She felt shame, she felt guilt, because how could she let her whole family down when they were counting on her to be, this model person? And it's the same thing with the AIDS epidemic. The gay community, they're at that particular time, it's in fact, if you look at what was called the DMS-3 and DMS-4, which is the diagnostic manual of psychologists and psychiatrists, homosexuality was considered to be a disease in and of itself. They took it out finally, and not only is it not, but it is another type of, quote, I don't know if they want to call it normal behavior, but it is certainly acceptable. It's not considered to be a disease at all. And anyway, these people, when they went through this process with Louise Hay, she brought back to them this idea of loving themselves, which in opening themselves to this love, they were healed. So maybe we're on to something here. You have to go to your heart and say, does this really feel right? When I hear this idea that is really love that can heal anything, does this feel right to me? Anybody else want to jump in? Yeah, go ahead, David.
Yeah, Dr. Tom, I think I really think you hit the nail on the head with that, the energy, the vibrational energy, and something that it came to me that I guess I've told you, I've done a lot of reading and studying in science, and it's just a model. It's just a model that appeals to me. Whether as far as to prove it or anything, I don't know. And I'm just going to throw it out there as a useful model. Is the many worlds theorem, in that all of these possible probabilities of action, of actuality or whatever exist. I mean, they're out there like spokes on a wheel going out there, and that in the healing and like the kidney function or the whatever is not. Instead of having the head wrapped around that, we've got to come up with this energy to stop this cancer. That's not necessary. We have to think like that. It's just that by evoking that energy, that binding energy, the glue of love, of oneness of the universe, and touching that level of consciousness, you shift. It just shifts, and it's on a different probability strand. And now the cancer's not there. There's no evidence of it. There's no evidence of that.
Right.
What I've noticed is that we tend to be locked into this idea of one reality, one probability, one type of thing. And the other thing I wanted to bring up was, it occurred to me at one time, because I'm more of a head person, and trying to wrap my head around, unlike Dana, who is very heart-centered, is wrap my head around this whole concept of love. And in meditation at one time, I got a very close relationship with my mother, and I had this image of what it feels like to be held by your mother, to be held as a child, and that sense, and what she feels toward the child, what it feels toward her. What is that? We'll call it love, It's oneness. She
Yes,
feels
yes.
total oneness, and the child feels total oneness. Feels it
Yes.
one, and so it just hit me. Was like, yes, it's that sense of oneness is really the essence or the intent of the, I can't think of the right word, but the energy, I guess, of love is when you hit that frequency. That's a word. You hit the frequency of oneness. But the trouble is that word has been twisted around with, like you said, romantic love and all this other stuff. And so, anyway, I just throwing that out there. But that, for me, it really helps thinking about, well, let's say I'm doing a healing or something for Dana. I would say, well, my Dana, the one I'm going to experience down the road, does not, the arthritis is working on it.
I hear that. I see it. I see it even more simply. I don't need to have a theory that says that one goes off in one direction as the old Dana and another is the new Dana in a new dimension. To me, you can be the same thing. You just change the frequency of the vibration into the higher dimension of who you are. And that's it. Isn't that what Jesus said? Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all things shall be added unto you. Seek that higher dimension, and as you move into that dimension, then you're going to experience all the things in that dimension where the cancer doesn't exist there. It does not even exist in that dimension.
Exactly. Yeah. You're right. It doesn't. It just depends on
everything I've studied in terms of healing makes sense in this way, that if you can get to that dimension where that vibration of love takes place, it's like, first I used to think, well, it has to actually somehow dissolve or lift up the disease, but actually what I like the way you said it, you just start living in that higher dimension, and whatever was there before is no longer there.
Exactly. It falls away. It's not actualized, however you want to say it. Yeah.
I'll tell you one more story along that line, which has really got me, and I got a chance to meet this guy, and I'm thinking, I know the name of his book, and my wife will tell me. The book was called The Black Butterfly. Oh, and his name is Richard Moss, and I got a chance to meet him. Now Richard Moss was a healer, and he was also a doctor. I think he's still around, but he might be in his 80s now. But he told a story, and this story really impressed me. A woman comes to his retreat, and she according to her, she's like in her 4th stage of cancer. The cancer has metastasized and spread to her entire body. She can still walk and stuff, but she says that she came to him because everybody's told her she's going to die within a short period of time. And he looked at her and he said, "Would you consider dancing with me?" And she said, "Okay." So they started dancing, and they started dancing more. And she got into it, and pretty soon she forgot about her body, she forgot about her mind, she forgot about everything. She became the dance. She just became it. And when she moved through the dance, it wasn't a direct experience she had. She just became the dance. And when she became the dance, she felt totally different. She switched into another dimension, and she forgot all about what was there before. And she not only survived, but they couldn't find any traces of cancer after that. And that's what Moss was saying, the same thing. We got into a dimension, which go back to what Maureen said, a dimension beyond time and space, a dimension that she felt the direct energy of love, and there was a total healing. So as practitioners, to me, it totally fits with our teaching. If we can get that to that place with our clients and, as Karen said, with ourselves, where we just open ourselves to that love, all kinds of healings can take place. We don't need to know what caused it. We don't need to know about mental equivalence and what the previous negative emotion was. I mean, we can still deal with those kinds of things because we know that negative emotions are not helpful. But you can have an instantaneous healing if you love enough. Okay, let me stop there for a moment and go to Tom Hoppe because he hadn't said anything. Hoppe, what do you think about all this?
It's very interesting, Tom. I'll tell you a story. My father, he was in hospice for 9 months. I took care of him the whole 9 months that he, I brought him to my house. And my father was a hardcore Marine who, if you looked at him wrong, he was slapping you upside the head. Mm. And it was like that, my entire life. And when he went into hospice, I noticed very clearly he began to realign to his truth, and his truth was love. And we have a large family, 7 kids. And what he started doing was he started calling each one of his children's names. And it was almost like I was the messenger, because when he got to my name, it was, but basically what he would tell me was that he loved them very, very much. And then to tell them to go out and spread this love, because that's the important part. And it was weird because, as I said, my father was this really tough Marine who if you looked at him wrong, the consequences would follow.
Yeah.
And he did that for many, many months. He would just go through his children, and it was weird because I had to sit there and hear him, but I was trying to figure out what is it he's trying to tell me. And it wasn't until the later months that I finally figured out that he was aligning himself to his true nature, which is love, and that's the answer. And he would call my mother into the room, and he would tell her that she was the life of he was the love of his life and all of this stuff. And 9 months of that, and I finally got it. I was like, wow, he's trying to tell me what the true essence of all of us are. Mm-hmm. It's love.
Yeah, beautiful. And so would you say, Tom, that even though he made his transition, but a total healing took place, or there was a total healing there?
There was a total healing that did take place. We all have our our stuff in life. And in that 9 months that he was with me, he healed whatever it is that he needed to heal. One of the, I had a Marine sergeant who came to the house one day, and he was, in the 9 months, you really couldn't talk to him because he was just out there. But when the Marine sergeant came to honor him, he remembered everything. He remembered the date that he enlisted. He remembered the date that he was discharged. what he did. He was in the Korean War. And there was a connection there that she was able to help him heal whatever it is that he needed to heal, during the Korean War. And it was, till this day, I still can't, what I experienced with him was something that I never in my wildest dreams thought that I would get this lesson from him.
Yeah, so it sounds like there was a total healing of the relationship between you and your father also.
Oh yeah, I mean it was many levels.
Yeah.
But the whole point of it is love.
Great. Okay, so I mean, we're doing this lesson. I want you to read the stuff in the lesson, and remember, it's on reciprocity. And it's so why is reciprocity so important? Because there's a relationship between the universal, which is this dimension that Maureen talked about, is beyond time and space. Remember, God is transcendent, is in a transcendent dimension above the intimate. God is in creation, but is more than creation. It's right in our Declaration of Principles. So that by touching this other dimension, by this reciprocal relationship, and what Troward called it. Now you have to be maybe devotionally oriented individual to get this, but he called it worship. And you say the word worship to people in Science of Mind sometime, and they cringe because they want to get away from traditional religion. But what Troward meant was you open to this universal presence and power beyond time and space, and you allow it to pour itself into you. That's where you allow this energy to just move and circulate and move into you. And so that through true worship, Troward said, anything can be healed. And he said, what it means is, I am the person that thou art, and thou art the person that I am. That was Troward's words. I am, and he used it as a mantra. I am the person that thou art, and thou art the person that I am. It's, and you go back to the Bible, and what the Bible, Moses says to God, who shall I say has sent me? And God says, tell them I am has sent me. I am. What? I am that I am. I am that. I am. I am the universe. I am. I am love. I am. I am that. I am. And who as the individual? The individual is I am. Remember we did that. That's our identity. That's our true identity. That's our essence. We are the universal I am individualized. And so we must be the love of the universe individualized. We must be that love. And by opening to the universal, we realize that. That's what our realization is. That's what realization means in spiritual mind treatment. Go back to the question that, remember, way back at the beginning, if you have enough faith, who cares the way in which it works? If you have enough faith, do you have enough faith? Well, when you get touched by this universal presence, this I am, you know, and you know that you know. Now, if we can stay in that consciousness and a client comes to us, they're going to feel that energy. They're going to feel that energy in which they know and they know. And that's exactly what Ernest got when he worked with Emma. See, Emma taught him that by opening and communing with this universal presence, he could not only feel that presence, but he could also communicate it to others. He by being in his presence, a client could feel the presence of healing, and that's why Ernest became so successful. He wasn't just a good orator. He he was good at that. He was good at being an orator and capturing people, but he also had this quality of being in the energy. And I don't know if you've ever been in there. I mean, I've left services, Sunday services, and turning to the person who said, "Wow, that was absolutely fantastic. It was unbelievable." And somebody else said, "What did he say?" And the person said, "I don't know what he said. All I know is how I feel." And that's how you tell. I mean, what he said is, that's just the words to invoke the spirit. I don't know. It means being slain in the spirit. And what does slain in the spirit mean? It means that there's this energy of love that moves into you and into your body, and you're a new person. I was to say a new creature in Christ. That's the old biblical, but you're a new person. Michael, what do you think of all this?
Wow, I just a new level of just understanding the power of love. In that again, it's not just the cookbook. Again, it's coming from a place of communing with love, and then just being love. So wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
Opening to it, yeah.
Tom, where did you get this thing with Emma, with Ernest to Emma? That's fascinating. I'd like to find out more about.
Ernest gave a talk at Asilomar around 1957 when he explained. I think that's where it came from. It could have come from his commentaries too, but I think it came from there. Around 1957, he gave a talk in which he explained, talked about Emma and the way, and Fenwick Holmes also made a statement. It's either in Ernest the Man or The Life and Times of Ernest Holmes, in which Fenwick's made that statement that it wasn't that Ernest already knew what mysticism was. It wasn't that Emma showed him what mysticism was, but she demonstrated the ability, because she communicated the mysticism to Ernest, and that because he saw and felt her communicated, he could communicate it to others. So, and he was always, I mean, he had conversations with George Bendall, and others, where Ernest knew for himself that what he wanted to experience more and more often, he wanted to experience these mystical experiences. And we're fortunate that we have the Whittier experience that we've talked about. Maybe not in this class, but we've talked about it. And there is a tape of Ernest. I don't know if you can hear it. Yeah, you can't hear it because it doesn't. I mean, I can hear it, but I've got the tape. Does anybody else have the tape of Ernest speaking? I'll send it to you. Okay, I'll send you the tape where he and see if you can feel it, because you might be able to feel the experience. And then when he wrote The Voice Celestial, that's what it was really all about, was this seeker who was trying to open themselves and then actually experience this healing light. He not only felt the love, but the manifestation of the love was the healing light of spirit. And when he felt that, I mean, so people can walk into that zone and be healed instantly. So, okay. See, Palamo or Barden, you guys want to say anything else about this before we move on?
I think what you just said is really important, and I think it's a very personal thing that each person has to kind of experience to understand it. And they think a lot, another word for it is kind of surrender. There's this, one of the Holmes books, or I don't remember where it came from, but there's a story about a Japanese boy, and he's very, very sick, and he's on his, almost like on his deathbed, and he totally surrenders and says, I don't care, whatever happens to me, whatever. And he's like miraculously cured, and then he becomes a healer. I don't remember what book it's in. But
I don't remember that one either.
It's in a Holmes or one of those books, but it's like that kind of thing.
That's from Emma.
Oh, is it Emma? Okay.
That's from one of Emma's books.
Okay. Oh, but it's that kind of thing. It's almost like, and it's very similar to 12.
Oh, I lost you, Barden.
He raised to a higher level.
Yeah, Barden, yeah, they disappeared, but they'll come back. Okay. Dana, do you want to add anything else to what we've talked about so far?
I'm just fascinated by the love. I get that. That makes such sense to me. And that stepping into that highest of vibrations, which is that love vibration. I love that. That speaks loud.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it brings the whole healing theory together. And it also, the other thing that it does is it crosses all religious boundaries.
Absolutely.
Because you can be a total Christian oriented, and that love vibration that Jesus brought forward of the healing vibration is totally there. It's there in all of the traditions.
Yeah, it's an unconditional vibration if you can move your awareness into it.
Yeah. Barden, are you back again?
Yeah, the computer just died, so I switched the iPad. No, I was just saying it's very similar to like 12-step programs where, you surrender to a higher power, and then, whatever addiction is lifted or whatever. And it really happens. I mean, I've experienced it myself. So I think, but it's that personal, and that's like you, when you're backed up against the wall to the point where there's no option, and you just somehow connect to that level.
I've noticed in some of our speakers and teachers and leaders, I've noticed that when you get to a certain age, you get to this place where you don't care how you look anymore. You're not worried or concerned about how you come across. You're not thinking about, well, maybe I want to run for the board of directors or be involved in the organization, because you've done whatever you've done. I've seen it in other people. They're totally let go. There's no defense mechanisms anymore. They just open and let it out. And when that happens, they're so real that everybody goes, oh my God. But see, we all have that ability. So, if we trust that innate presence and power in you, just trust it and allow it to come forth. And you'll really be successful in whatever you do. Let's see. Does anybody else want to say anything before we move to the next area?
Yeah, Tom. Yeah, I'd like to say that I think we've hit it right on the nail head, and it's completely consistent with what Ernest said later in life, which was that he was sorry he didn't talk about love as much as he talked about the law.
Yeah. And I'll tell you the other thing, what we can do, what any of us can do, is that if we can live our life this way, we can touch the hearts and minds. We can actually, the reason, if you could get Centers for Spiritual Living to live and move and be like this, the organization grows and prospers. Everything grows and prospers because it comes from love. You're not looking over your shoulder to see, well, how does so-and-so perceive the way I'm doing this or the way I see this or whatever. You just, at a deep level, there's a deep level of trust. And if you really come from love, you're not going to make a mistake. You're going to do it just the perfect right way. Okay, good. All right. So now what I want to do, we've got a few minutes left. So I'm just going to highlight some of the things in the slides because you haven't had a chance to look at the slides. So we'll go. What these slides do is they really present they present the entire theory of healing based on this idea of reciprocity. So that's what we're talking about. Everything is vibrational energy, and I'll go through them pretty quick. So if anybody wants to say anything as we just go through, I'm only going to emphasize things maybe we haven't touched on yet, but I encourage you to take a look at this and see. Especially, I want to know if there's some areas that are inconsistent, that are not totally logical with science of mind. In other words, what we're putting forth here is a healing theory that is totally consistent with Holmes, consistent with Troward, consistent with what even Maureen said about quantum physics, and she said it beautifully, and consistent with science as we know it. So if there's something that isn't consistent with that, we want to know. Okay. Everybody knows, if in this class, when we talk about the reciprocal process, we've talked about polarity, and we've talked about when we open, the first thing we do is we open to the universe. And when we do, the universe becomes the divine giver and the individual becomes the divine receiver. Now, on the next slide, you can see it's a quote from Thomas Troward. And it explains how the universe works and what is our place in the cosmic order. And what he says, the key word there is distributors. We become divine distributors of the universal power. Okay, then I switch over just a little bit to what we used in absolute treatment. This is kind of interesting. You're not going to find this. I didn't find it anywhere else. I found it from a quote from Holmes in his book. I think it was part of the New Thought Dictionary. And Ernest says this: the purpose of treatment is that the mind shall become aware of the gifts of the spirit, shall accept them, and specialize them in the experience of the individual life. Now that's a beautiful quote, I think. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that Ernest didn't say what the gifts of the Spirit were. He said, okay, I don't think he was talking about the gifts of the Holy Spirit. If you go in the Bible, you'll see that there are 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit, and you can read. That's not what he's talking about. What I think he is talking about is the gifts as the first emanations of spirit that Troward talks about. So the whole basis of this theory is that the gifts of the spirit are the fundamental properties of spirit: life, light, love, peace, power, beauty, and joy. And what he says, and what Troward says, same thing, is if you want to live the life of total harmony and total oneness, you incorporate these properties of spirit in you. What is it? You accept them and specialize them. That's your job. That's my job. We are divine distributors of the universe. And Troward, I put this chapter in here from The Creative Process in the Individual by Troward, because he actually goes down and says why these are the properties. And they're life and love and light and peace and power and beauty and joy. And he explains logically why one comes from the other. And that's how he got to the seven properties. So at the very bottom, he says here, for these reasons, we may sum up the substantive being of all originating spirit as life, love, light, power, peace, beauty, and joy, and its active power as that of initiative and selection. In other words, what he says here, know who you are. You, me. We are open and receptive to the universe. We are connected to the universe, and we are empowered by the universe. Then we are distributors of this universal energy. Why? Because we can specialize the energy. The energy of the universe is only potential, but through us, we can specialize it. We are divine distributors. And how do we do that? Through initiative and through selection. And he uses lots of examples. Like, we find out from the universe that there is a law of flotation. We are divine distributors, and we actually create ships that float, even though the ship itself may be made of steel, which is heavier than water, but we understand the law of flotation that has been given to us from Universal Spirit. Universal Spirit gives us the law of aerodynamics. And for a long time, we didn't use that, but then we could make an airplane because we understood the law. We're distributors. So what we are, so now you and I have got to this place where we have understood that we have been given the ability to access unconditional love. As much as we can totally open ourselves to, we can access the unconditional love. So what does it mean? It means now as distributors, you and I pick the distribution of that love. We use that love in healing. We use that love in our relationships. We use it wherever we go because we are that love individualized. And he uses that statement, I am. Remember, we said, God said, I am. I am. We say, I am, therefore I can. This is Troward's statement. I am, therefore I can, therefore I will. Okay, so I am means I recognize and unify myself with my universal source, the first two steps of treatment. I can means that now I have all of the power at the universe at my disposal because I've opened myself to the universe and it is there. And I will says, as long as I'm connected, I use that power to distribute wherever I want to distribute, and the result is automatic. That's why we let go and we let God. It's all there. It's all there. Okay, so spiritual mind treatment means accessing these higher levels and going through these steps. And this is the theory that just totally makes sense, and it fits totally within the 5 steps of treatment. I'm not going to go into Occam's razor. You can read about it. It simply says it's a simple statement of energy that is not too simple, but because it is simple, that it's probably the right one. Okay. So we can learn to direct this energy. We're transmitters. We are transmitters of this spiritual energy, whether we know about it or not. In other words, we are the divine distributors of the universal energy. That's what we're here for. Okay? So our goal is to learn how to establish it and use it in time and space. So we take it from beyond time and space and use it in time and space. Okay, that's who we are. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead here because you just have to just there's a lot of stuff here. The circle here, you can see this, that there's the physical, the mental, spirit realm, all realms, and they're all interconnected. Okay, then says what is disease? See, what happened is lots of times people never defined what disease was. What is a disease? And some people would say, well, a disease, a cancer is a disease, or mononucleosis is a disease, or whatever. And well, what is a disease? Actually, it's a condition, And the disease, the particular disease is a label. It's just a label you're putting on it. But that doesn't mean that the cancer is not part of spirit. It is spirit vibrating at a lower level. So it's all spirit. It's just spirit that is in a host which causes disharmony. So everything is spiritual energy vibrating at different levels. Okay? Somehow a blockage occurs. We don't need to know how the blockage occurs. We need to know that we can release the blockage, and we got to it. How? By providing love energy, by opening the spirit and providing. And then Troward says something very interesting here. He says, no current can ever flow from a lower to a higher level. This thing has to move here.
Actual elevation.
From a lower to a higher level, be that of actual elevation in the case of water. In other words, water doesn't run uphill, or difference in potential as in the case of electricity. You can't go from a lower to a higher, but you can always go from a higher to a lower. And that's why you open to this higher level of spirit. You look to the source, you open to the source, and then the source pours down into the lower level. Okay. There's so much here. I don't want to. I don't want to just talk and go through this, because I don't think that is. I really encourage you to take a look and really read about this. And next week I'll ask some questions about it to see that we really have embodied it, because we talked about some of it. Especially, I want you to take a look at the question about the difference between disease and death, and we kind of covered that tonight. Okay. And it explains what the soul is, and we had this in other classes too. There's a picture here of the spiritual part of us, which is our essence. Then there's the soul part of us, which is our conscious mind and our subconscious mind, and then the body part of us. So there's a body, soul, spirit, or body, mind, spirit. So what happens, according to Ernest, at death is the cord that is holding, this silver cord that is holding the body to the soul, is severed. The body remains in time and space. It has no animating process any longer, and it returns to the dust in which it came from. Remember, from dust to dust. And the soul goes on to another dimension. Holmes says goes on to another dimension. He said it doesn't go back to the earth, it goes to another dimension. And what happens is the soul, because it has already recorded all the memories and the attitudes, it can actually create a new physical form within which to express at the new dimension. Okay, you can see there's the silver cord. There's a picture of the silver cord. Now that's a person who's dreaming. He's down there dreaming, and he's gone off, and there are actually some people who teach how to do that. What are those guys called? Eckankar? Is it Eckankar? The Eckankar movement, I think it is. Okay, so here's a whole list of what causes this disharmony. And at the top of the list, we have entropy that Ernest didn't talk about. Negative thoughts and emotions, karmic tendencies, race consciousness. And then we also include pathogens, incompatible energy substances that enter into the body. Okay, so that's the disease is the label we put onto it. Okay. Let's see. So all of these conditions can be overcome, and there's entropy can be overcome by what we call love, which we just spent a bunch of time talking about. Negative thoughts and emotions can be removed from the subconscious. We've used techniques and methods to find negative thoughts and emotions and have them removed. We can use forgiveness and the grace of God to get rid of karmic tendencies. And I'm not going to go into, there's a difference between karma and karmic tendencies. Science of Mind doesn't believe in karma, but it does accept karmic tendencies, which is the tendency for things to happen in a certain way because of a belief system that you have adopted. Troward got upset in one of his books because some people were telling him, here's what they told him. They said, Troward, you cannot say that God forgives. And Troward said, why not? And they said, because God doesn't see the sin in the first place. God is perfect, whole, and complete. If God is perfect, whole, and complete, how can God see something that isn't perfect, whole, and complete? Therefore, God never sees the sin, and therefore God cannot forgive. And Troward said, you bumbling midget, or something similar to that. You bumpkin, he used the word bumpkin sometimes. He said, of course God forgives. Because, and really, you know, it's really, there is the grace of God, there is the forgiveness of God. You know, you can look at him, as study him, look at him as the same thing. God sees all things new, and so you can let go, you can just let go of the old and see the new. That's really what it means. And then there's a whole section here on the grace of God and what the grace of God. And then there's a discussion about the feeling of love and the emotion of fear that we talked about in other classes. And people can disagree with this, but I have come to the conclusion myself that there's only one feeling, and it's love. And then all the other emotions, that positive emotions, come from love. And there's only one true emotion, and that's fear. And it just makes sense to me. And where fear comes from, the survival mechanism of the body, because it's built in the fight-flight response, and love comes from God. And that's who we are, and that's our nature. So the reason we have the fear mechanism is to protect our body so that we can automatically respond when we need to respond, when the saber-toothed tiger is coming after us. Okay, but what happens is, of course, we generalize the fear and we think people are trying to attack us, so we try to protect ourselves with our ego, and it goes round and round and round. So we have to realize that the ego is not helping us. We have to surrender it and come to the true nature of who we are as the I am. Moving above the law of averages, we talked about that. Taking dominion and choosing love. Okay. Okay, so some of the things we can do is just continue to pray every day. Every day, get in the habit of just praying, praying, praying. Praying without ceasing. Surrendering. Saying, if that fits for you to say, I am the person that thou art the person that I am. Keep saying it. Eliminating negative thoughts and emotions. We talked about that in other classes. And then discovering virtues, which I didn't really develop in this class. All of the different virtues. Okay. And the last thing I want to talk about tonight, the last thing is, we brought it up last week a little bit, is the issue of harmlessness, that to live our lives in harmlessness. We look beyond our masks and we continue to see everyone as a spiritual being. And if you can't see everyone as a spiritual being, you commit to do no harm. I especially like my little cartoon here. It's just a little levity about the spider that you can read about. Spiders are harmless. This spider does practice harmlessness, but only for spiders. So that gets us to the end. Whoops. Go back. the previous slide, which is the end. Disease will continue to exist as long as our spiritual energy is blocked. And from last week, as we live from our masks of personality, it continues because we're continually trying to protect ourselves. But we eventually remove the masks, allow the natural essence to come forth, and then disease disappears, and we get in touch with that continuous idea of love, and we live as whole and complete spiritual beings. Okay, so that's where we are. So what I want to do, we did that fast, but you need to really read the lesson, read the slides, really get into it, and then if you have a question that come up with, write it down, and we'll talk about it at the beginning of class next week, because we have presented tonight really the whole theory, the whole healing theory that we wish to use as practitioners when we are working with our clients. And then all of these questions is, can the client block the treatment? Does the client have to accept the treatment? The treatment is in the mind of takes place in the mind of the practitioner, and the client's in the same mind. But if you love enough, the point is, if you love enough, you actually lift up everyone to that love, that vibration of love. And it's what you already said. At that vibration of love, the disease does not exist. It's not there. Remember, David said that. It's not there anymore. It's gone because it doesn't live at that level. It doesn't live at that spiritual level. All right. So let's do this then. I want to just tell me what you got out of this class tonight, and we'll start with Michael. Michael, what did you get out of the class?
Wow, I just this is really the whole idea of love is the only healing agent, and I think that's. I was just thinking about Emmett Fox's. It says, "If you only love enough."
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Okay, that's what it is. All right. Okay, Palama, what'd you get out of tonight's class?
Pretty much the same thing. It's when you boil it all down to the one word, to love, there's no explanation needed. It's that simple. It's as many steps as there are in it, it's still really simple. Love conquers all. It's that simple.
Yep. And love is a transcendent power, transcendent energy that, again, we are divine distributors. We particularize it. So, Barden, what'd you get out of the class tonight?
I think that I love this class. I think it's like really the core of science of mind. And if you truly understand and embody this class, you're like there basically.
Yeah. Great. Okay, Dana, how about you? What'd you get out of the class?
Wow, the vibration of love can align in a whole healing way that disease and all of these other appearances aren't there. They're not at that vibration. I love that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you, David, for saying that, because the studies that have been done with healings absolutely show that. That's why you have spontaneous healings. They can't find what they were looking at before. It's not there.
Because it's not there.
It's not there because you're vibrating at a different level. Beautiful. Okay, David, what'd you get out of the class tonight?
Well, I'm a little concerned that we're not covering quite enough material. So I'm feeling a little bit shortchanged on that. And I'm really concerned about the dinosaurs. I never really thought about arthritic dinosaurs. And so, now I got to factor that in. But
well, that's not too bad, because look at the dinosaur. I mean, the dinosaurs they're loving life. They're on the earth, and a meteor hits the earth.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't cause them. What was in their consciousness?
There was probably a Messiah dinosaur.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
And he said, "We got to make room for the mammals to come in." But what? Yeah. What was I going to? There was something I was going to say. But anyway, it was fantastic, Dr. Tom. And
Thank you.
I needed this. I needed this class.
Ditto.
Okay, Karen, what did you get out of the class?
Oh my gosh. I ditto Michael's wow. And aside from David's humor, our discussions were fabulous, and it brings a clarity to me on how to talk to clients more effectively on what their experience, or myself even. And when we talk about love and the power and the energy of love, it becomes so clear. And it's just so rich. This class is so rich. And you know, Dr. Tom, everybody talked about you after you left. You're their favorite teacher. They loved you, and it's not because you're old. It's because you're awesome. So I just wanted to tell you that. So
well, I do appreciate it, but you know, and we had a great time. And you know, the wonderful thing about it is that you've been teaching for so many years, and then all of a sudden, if the right things, it just kind of all comes together. And you don't have to effort. That's the where you don't have to effort to allow it to happen. It just happens. And that's, you know, the magic of spirit. And that's when, in anything in our life, do you ever notice that in your life when you're in some kind of activity and you just let go and you're just flowing with the effortlessness of it? It's beautiful. The only time we get into problems is when we're trying too hard, or, you know. Hoppa, what'd you get out of the class tonight?
It was a great class, Tom. I enjoyed it. You know, the discussion, and you know, it was good. Thank you.
Okay, great. And Maureen, what'd you get out of the class? Oh, I got to unmute you. Sorry.
Got on you.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, go ahead. What'd you get out of the class?
Okay, great. Well, thank you again to remind me that love really, like the Beatles record, love is all there is. And I was thinking about that, an experience I had years ago of the light and love, and realizing that it's a vibration of light. It is a vibration, I called it light and love.
Yeah.
But it's that brilliant white light with that feeling of being held. It's truly amazing. And just thanks for reminding me.
Now, you did a talk recently, you mentioned on quantum physics, and you said some things tonight about it. If you could, would you send me an email just kind of explaining the steps? What I'm looking for is something to incorporate in, so at the kind of like at the beginning of the Big Bang, in the creation of the physical universe, and how the light waves from the Big Bang become particles, and how the particles create stars, and how the stars, the supernova stars, actually create carbon, which is the fundamental thing for life. And then, you know, the gradual coming together.
It starts with an observer. Now,
yeah.
Quantum physics talks about observer. I would add intention, that there is an observer, but that observer has an intention. Like the observer of the double slit experiment has an intention that either they're going to see a wave or a particle. But you see, light is both a wave and a particle. We have a wave signature, but we're mostly particle because we're so big. But in quantum physics, they call it the observer. So there was an observer of the singularity, which is the Big Bang. But I'll send you some stuff.
Yeah, and I've got some slides on it too. But so the difference is the original observer is the creator
Right.
is the all is because that's the original observer, that the creator sustainer of the entire universe. And
right, and
but
the mind that is in the original observer is in our mind,
right.
And so we have the ability through prayer treatment. We have the ability to slow down a wave, change, slow the frequency of that
right.
wave of light or that electron, and
right.
cause it to become a particle.
Right, right. Yeah, and especially I'm interested in the idea of the quantum means jumping from one field in time and space to an area outside of time and space. I'm interested in that.
Well, quantum jump, yeah, because electrons don't just go like down a road to the next orbit.
Right,
They jump and they disappear from this time and space, and then they reappear, but randomly based on Heisenberg's principle of uncertainty.
Yep. No, I know what you're talking about. Okay, great.
Okay.
Did everybody get a chance to share? Everybody got a chance to share? Okay, so we'll have class again next week. So my challenge is, based on our structure of the 7 spiritual secrets, I've got to come up with a lesson that fits perfectly like this lesson. So that's my challenge, and I'll be working on it. So we will see everybody next Wednesday night. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Tom.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
Tom,
Good night.
share. Did you, Appa?
Bye.
What's that, Tom?